Do you have to be so you all the time?
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bible Geeks podcast. I'm Brian Sheely.
I'm Ryan Joy. And in the criminal justice system, the people are represented by two separate yet equally important groups. The Romans, who enforce the laws, and the disciples, who accidentally break them. These are their stories.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Winter Watch Party. We're watching Season 2, Episode 7. This is called The Reckoning, and honestly, the show turns into like a full-blown procedural this week. Jesus and his disciples are detained, they're interrogated, they're held in a Roman holding cell.
Tensions are high. Simon Peter is having a bit of a panic attack. The disciples are turning on each other, and Jesus is just having a casual chat with a spy. So today we are opening the case file. We're going back to look at the usual suspects, examine the evidence, and see if the disciples can beat the charges.
Cue the music, everyone. This is Law and Order Capernaum. Okay, Ryan, so we've been doing this on these episodes here. We've been doing a little vibe check. 5 loaves of fishes down to 1. Where do you put this episode? This is kind of, I don't know, a bottle episode, part 2. Maybe not so much, but there's a lot going on here in this one, I suppose.
Yeah, this is the one where he gets arrested. Yep. So there's a little bit of action, a little bit of per our intro here, a little bit of our police procedural approach. And yeah, I liked it. I'm going to go four loaves and fishes here.
Yeah, I was also thinking 4. I'm saving, obviously, my 5s for a special day, but 4, I think this is good. You know, it's tension, a lot of payoff here, some political drama. Like, I think this is it's definitely one of these episodes of television that you can appreciate where it's coming from and the difficulty that it's raising, and is he going to make it through? And in the progression of the season, really, like, this is a great lead up to the final episode, the finale, just really setting up some good action here for that episode.
Yeah, and you know, it was such a interesting political climate, right? With the power that the Jews had, but the limits to that power, and then the power that Rome had, but they're kind of disinterested. A lot of Jewish, this seems like an internal issue that you guys need to work through, but they have their own thing that they're trying to, manage the peace and that kind of thing. So I think there's a lot of interesting first century insights in this episode also.
Yeah, well, let's do this like Law and Order Capernaum style and get into the lineup here, because I think when you think about being detained by the police, I think you really find out who you are as a person when you're forced to talk about what you've done and where you were that night and whatever. So let's look at the lineup here of suspects and see who cracked first. We've got Peter up on the table here, and he is kind of a flight risk in general. Like, I think generally he's spiraling in these episodes, and he wants to fight. He wants to run. He's like a loose cannon. And understanding like where he's been and the law trouble that he's been under from all of his tax debts. What do you think about Peter in this moment of, political difficulty, let's just say?
And some of these episodes run together. I've watched this season all together, but I think in some ways I think of Peter as more level-headed than what you're saying, and Andrew as the bigger issue. Like, Andrew is out of control. He wants to go and, break Jesus out of jail. And Andrew, I think, is having more of a flashback to the times with John the Baptist. He's somebody who wants to make sure that he's controlling things and taking care of things. Peter seems to be trying to calm Andrew down here more, to me.
Interesting.
But I don't know. Yeah, what do you see
Yeah,
here?
I could see that. I mean, I feel like I feel like Peter just in general is one of my most relatable people in this whole show.
Definitely, definitely.
He's so human. He has moments of great faith, but then moments of just spiraling out of control. And I could definitely see what you're talking about there with Andrew. And maybe at this moment he's trying to be a little bit more circumspect with Andrew, but I don't. Yeah, I think they still struggle. They wind up being a really good pairing of difficulty in some ways. But maybe let's pull up one more suspect of the lineup here. And I was thinking Matthew. Matthew's not going to like tattle on anybody, but everyone thinks that he's going to, because he's like, of course he is Matthew. Like, he has to tell all the details. He has to provide all the color commentary or whatever it is, all the facts and figures. And you can definitely see where the passion maybe of Peter up against someone like Matthew flaring up again in these moments where it's like, don't say anything, Matthew.
When you say he's Matthew, it reminds me about Peter. Andrew saying to him, "Do you have to be so you all the time?"
Yeah.
And I mean, Matthew, he is pretty level-headed, I think, in this situation. And I'm thinking of the scene where Jesus has been taken. Peter and Andrew come back from fishing, and Matthew and Mary and a few other people, Peter to some extent, are trying to calm things down and say, we don't need to. He said stay here. He said to wait. Yeah. And of course Simon the Zealot and Andrew are ready to go and break him out.
Yep.
And so I think Matthew is a bit of a voice of reason, and I don't know if you have this in the map for us to talk about, but I feel like Mary is the real stabilizer here.
Yeah.
Are we going to talk about that later, or should I talk about it now?
I wasn't, but I think it's spot on, right? Because of the figures that we have in this episode that are like real level-headed and clear on what's going on, I would agree with you that it's Mary, but it's also Jesus, and we could talk more about him. I feel like Jesus is like Cool Hand Luke here. He's like he's not worried at all. He's like analyzing his interrogators. Not a big deal for him. Mary, on the other hand, I think is definitely somebody who could spiral out into worry, but doesn't seem to be.
She speaks with an interesting, subtle authority, kind of humble authority when they're all arguing, and she closes the whole discussion down when she basically takes ownership of what she did and her confession, her acknowledgement. I shouldn't have left.
Yeah.
I did the wrong thing. I was listening to my own observations and what I saw, implying you guys are doing that also right now, and we need to not do that. And then she says, he said to wait. And then she walks away. And sometimes, like, the last thing when you say a thing, we talk about a mic drop moment. Sometimes you say the thing and you walk away, and she's like escorting Mary, Jesus' mom, away, and it just settles it. And there is nothing more that can be said after that. It's done.
So, thinking about like the Law and Order style of this, I think you wind up getting into this good cop, bad cop kind of scenario where I feel like this episode starts to paint a picture of the Romans in a really interesting way. Like, these are not over the top, like cartoon villains, but these are, at least like Atticus here. He's smart. He's curious. He seems to be somewhat respectful of Jesus, but then, these Romans are like pretty calm. And then you get the disciples who are like wild and, I mean, not all of them, but like many of them are very wild and out of control. And so I don't know, like in a weird way, you sort of start connecting with people like the Romans in this episode. I don't know. I found myself doing that. Did you at all find them as like compelling people in this episode?
Oh, definitely. Throughout this season, Atticus, what an interesting role to play. And I've never researched, is there such a thing as this secret private detectives of Caesar? But what an interesting idea. I mean, it makes sense. And then Quintus is really, just he's the one that was sitting behind the desk, right?
Yes. Yep.
Is that Quintus?
Yeah.
And he's just like perpetually amused by the things underneath him. And that just seems like such a true situation for someone in power who's kind of above the fray,
right,
to see. And like, I could see him being like, I like you, Jesus. I find, this Jesus character, I want to watch him. And, I do find them interesting. And then I don't know the guy's name, but the Roman soldier who has that soft spot for Matthew.
Oh, yeah.
I think he's really interesting. And you can see, these are humans, and they're not great people. They're not, I agree with what you said. They're not cartoon villains. And in real life, these were people who there were good Roman centurions. We know that. There were evil people. There were people like Pilate who just sort of saw the truth, and he's kind of like a Quintus type character who saw this, and he wasn't inherently evil. He was trying to free Jesus, but he ended up just compromising completely to the crowd and doing a horrible thing in killing Jesus, or letting Jesus be killed, because of the political realities that he was navigating, and that was where his head was.
Yeah. Well, I really, I think this is deeply rooted in the Bible in some ways. As you start to see Paul, especially in his life and the interactions he had with Roman officials and things like that, like there was a curiosity there. There wasn't always like a, villainous sort of super hate that was going on all the time. It was kind of interesting, the dynamics that they had together. So I think an episode like this is helpful to maybe see like what could the disciples, Jesus, some of these people have been going through, not just with the Jewish religious leaders at the time, but also with the world power of Rome. And you think about all of this, and there's this like thread, weaving throughout this episode, and like Jesus is working on a sermon. He's got, he's got some stuff he's working through with this sermon, and I think it's interesting to think about Jesus prepping for a sermon, and we won't get into that in too much detail here, but do you find it interesting how, when Jesus is looking literally at all of this difficulty and struggle, and, and then he says, blessed are the peacemakers, that like he's not actually talking to a real life scenario that he's dealing with at the time. I have to imagine that so much of like the Beatitudes probably had real life moments that Jesus was probably calling back to.
It's an interesting thought. And is this the episode where it closes with saying that? Or maybe it's the next one where you start to, he says them, and it shows vignettes of the different disciples, and how, isn't that true that you can say one of the Beatitudes and somebody comes to mind? Who is the peacemaker in your life? Who do you know that is just pure in heart, that is always hungering and thirsting for righteousness? And you just see, we could start listing off friends that both of us know. Okay, that reminds me of Chad. That reminds me of Alan. That reminds me of Sherilyn. And it's a kind of a cool thing to think of Jesus looking in people's faces and saying, blessed are you whenever you are persecuted. Blessed are those who will see God.
Well, and so we have in this moment, this is the episode 7, where he's closing with the prayer, right? He's closing with the Lord's Prayer here at the end. And, I really do appreciate this episode in so many ways. He's not lecturing his disciples. He gathers them all together and teaches this version of the Lord's Prayer. And so right in the middle of all of this fear and difficulty and everything else that's going on, he gives them something that is entirely from God. It's entirely focused on a connection and a conversation with the Lord, asking him to deliver us from evil. And I don't know, I think in so many ways when there's a lot of struggle and difficulty and interpersonal relationships, can we just talk for a little bit about where prayer is like the mic drop moment at the end of this episode and how it is for our lives too?
Prayer as the mic drop moment. I mean, prayer is like handing the mic to God, right?
Yeah.
Prayer is saying, okay, I don't know what to do with this. I'm gonna call on you for help. And this is a beautiful scene where the disciples are saying, can you teach us how to pray? We always see you praying. Can you teach us how to do that? Which is biblical. That happened. That we have an account of that. And for Jesus to walk through, and it was kind of neat that he took the model prayer from Matthew 6, and in this episode, he explained each line a little bit, and then it fades away. So yeah, prayer is a kind of mic drop moment. There's a reason why whenever we have a tense moment in the church or we have a meeting or whatever it is, we close by saying, often at least, by saying, okay, let's go to God and leave this with him.
Yeah, I appreciate so much that, like, in these moments of difficulty, to really, if we can remember to lean on the Lord in prayer and talk to him about these things, it's not a trite, like, flippant thing. And I want to be the kind of person who people are like, we always see you praying, or we always, like, we know that you're praying, and then, like, asking more information or questions about that. Of course it's Jesus. That's what he was always doing. But you just, like, you imagine having that kind of presence that people just know, like, that's what you're about. That's who you are as a person who prays. And I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of stress and difficulty in this episode that, prayer just feels like the correct way of ending the whole thing, going from this time in a holding cell into a place of communicating with God about all the things that are going on.
I have those people. Do you have those people that you're like, actually, that's who I want to teach me to pray?
Yeah,
this is a person of prayer that knows something about this I need to learn. And I love that for our kids to see us, or our, the people around us to see us reflecting the Lord's love of prayer, and know that there's something that we can grow in, and that maybe we could teach them something.
Yeah.
Something to aspire to.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I appreciated this episode. And again, we're nearing the end of this season. We're nearing actually the end of our winter watch party. So thanks everyone for following along with us. Next week, we're going to get into the season finale, episode 8 of season 2. This is where we get to the Sermon on the Mount finally. And then we see Judas, making some moves. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in that moment. So thanks, everyone, for tuning in to the Bible Geeks podcast. You can find us on our website or wherever you get your podcasts. You can rate us wherever you're listening to this, too. We'd appreciate that. And until next episode, may the Lord bless you and keep you.
Shalom.